No Jumper, coolest podcast in the world. And today we have Andrew Barber on the podcast. How's it going, man?
Oh, what's up? How are you?
I'm amazing.
I'm so happy to be here.
We were just talking about the fact that we apparently met back in the day in Chicago, and I guess we didn't remember. So there we go.
So there we go.
A couple of too cool for school white boys.
Yeah, right. And so I think our mutual friend Brian Kaczynski.
Shout out to Kaczynski.
Big shout out to him. He had this where my office was in this building called Lacuna. Mm-hmm. He had the bakery. He had like his BMX like track in there.
Yep.
And it was super cool. It was really dope. It was really dope.
Do you know why that got shut down?
I mean, the building just changed.
He got like corporate sponsors for an event he did, so then they tried to like triple his rent.
Yeah, it just
so he got fucked.
It just didn't.
He really, because he had a couple of different locations. He really got fucked in the ass a couple times in a row by the building owners and shit.
Yeah, because he used to be in like wasn't he in like the old like bread factory?
See,
like
I never went to the first one, but I know that one was like a lot more sketchy and like cold and everything.
Sketchy.
He has stories about like 2 Chainz showing up there and Chain smoking blunts in front of him and stuff, and he was like, man, it was so crazy. Yeah.
I've been to a bunch of video shoots in that bread factory.
Right.
Because it was such a grim looking location that rappers were always used to shoot videos in, and you could just walk in.
Right.
And then like he had his random BMX track out there or whatever, and it's like you don't know what the hell's in that building.
Sketchy.
And then he was in Lacuna, and that was like 2012, and that's when like everybody was in that building.
Right.
So that building was like super popular.
Because I remember when I went there, he was like, "Oh, Katie Got Bands shot a video right here or whatever," and I was still kind of brand new. I'm like, "Damn, Katie Got Bands. That's pretty dope."
Because you would get Katie would be in the building, King Louie would always be there,
right?
And like that's when everybody was cool. Like all the rappers were cool. So like Fredo Santana would be there.
They're not cool anymore.
I mean, I think there's some politics, but it was just since it was 2012. It was like an exciting time. It was new. It was vibrant. Everybody was working together. Everybody was really excited. So you catch all these different people there at the building.
So for those who don't know, Andrew runs the most popular Chicago hip-hop website of all time that you started back in 2007.
Yep.
And I've been aware of it since around the same time. We kind of come from the same era of being like extremely influenced by Now Right, Two Dope Boys, those kinds of hip-hop blogs and stuff. So who were you before that as a hip-hop fan?
Like
just a guy going to shows?
Yeah, I was just a guy going to shows, man. I was, I've been listening to hip hop since I was 8 years old. Always loved the culture, wanted to work in it, but it's way easier for people to get into it now. Like if you were trying to get in the industry now, it's so much easier. But like as you know, like 10 years ago, there was none of this.
Right.
What we're doing right now, this didn't exist.
Yeah,
right?
There was nobody who had made a name for themselves as like an internet personality or someone who was making content through the internet, and especially as a white guy too, it was kind of like, well, what is my place in this? Like,
right.
Unless I'm going to go and be an A&R for Def Jam or some shit, then what am I going to do? You
definitely can't do that in Chicago because the only label stuff that they have there are like radio people that work the radio records. Right. There's no like A&Rs or anything there.
Right.
And so like I used to fax my resume to labels for internships.
Right.
I used to hound people. Like one time I ran into P.D. Pablo.
Wow.
In like 2001.
You took your shirt off and spun it around like a helicopter.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, can you help me get an internship at Jive? And he was like, what's an internship?
Right.
But like he introduced me and I tried to get, and I used to fax my resume to like every label and nobody ever called me back. So fast forward, years later, I'm in Chicago, going to shows. And there's this whole cool scene happening, right? There's a lot of interesting things happening in the city.
Who's the scene at this time that you decided to start this?
The Cool Kids.
The Cool Kids were the big one.
The Cool Kids, this is when the Cool Kids first started blowing up, right? And then like the early Treated Crew, which is like Mano and Hollywood Holt and Mano, Mike Terror, those guys. And then like Kid Sister had her thing going on. And so there was a lot of like that type of scene. And the Cool Kids in the Hall were popular then too. But the Cool Kids were like definitely the trendsetters.
Okay.
And they weren't getting any blog coverage. I don't think they were getting any like national attention.
So this is before the hype beasts and everybody kind of figured out the hype beasts, the actual website, before they figured out that this was something they wanted to cover.
Yeah, right. And so
how old are you in 2007 when you decided to start the blog?
26.
26. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So still a kid in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, but the people now are even younger doing it.
Yeah.
People are like in high school starting blogs.
I feel that all the time when I like see other dudes starting podcasts or doing vlogs or other internet content, and I'm like, dude, I'm 10 years older than you. Like, you are so lucky that you have this head start on me.
Right? Isn't that great? I mean, they can. The world is theirs, and they can like really do this full time and not have to go through a lot of the BS that I had to go through to do it.
Yeah. So you knew about blogging. How'd you know about? Was that the original idea?
Well, basically, okay, so let me get back to, so I was going to these shows, and, like, they were not getting any national coverage, and I had a corporate job that I worked in advertising sales for Fox, of all, like the National Geographic Channel, FX, and I would just sit at my desk and read blogs.
Right.
And I would read them, and I would be like, you know, they're great. I used to read Byron Crawford all the time, and then Nas, Cocaine Blunts was one of my favorite ones, and then Early Now Right. And I'm like, man, I could do this.
Right.
You know, I can write about this stuff. I have, as much knowledge to cover this stuff. So, you know, I was going to shows, and like I said, they were not getting any coverage. So I'm like, I need to start covering what's happening here in Chicago, because unless you were like Kanye, Common, Lupe, or Twista, you weren't getting any national love.
Right.
But there was all these things happening. It's like national artists would come to Chicago, and their shows would be like half full.
Right.
But like the cool kids would have a line down the street.
Right.
Around the corner, people trying to get in and dying to be a part of it. I'm like, there's something special here. We need to jump on it.
Right. That's actually so crazy, because when I started this podcast, this is a slight tangent, but when I started this podcast, it's because like there was a lot of underground rappers in LA that I was hanging out with, or that I saw selling out venues of 1,000 plus, 2,000 plus, and they were not, and still aren't getting any fucking media attention, like Xavier Wolf and Bones and Puya and all these guys, Suicide Boys, not all from LA, but you know, that's exactly the same like feeling I had, is like, fuck, like why the fuck is, you know, this blog not writing about them? Like, why isn't anyone doing any media coverage of these guys? So that was your feeling at the time?
And that's just always weird to me, when there's like, I feel like you have to get the certain couple websites to talk about you before everybody else will.
And it's so bizarre how it's almost like a separate thing. There's like being popular, and then there's the media coverage.
Yeah, right.
And the media coverage helps get you more popular. But we also, you and I have seen tons of artists who got tons of media coverage but couldn't sell at a show for
there's 100 people there.
Yeah.
You know, they're getting booked at like a 500 person venue, and there's 100 people in the room.
Right.
It's crickets.
But they're on fucking Hypebeast and every website.
They're on every
day,
website, and you think that they're way bigger. And I mean, that's what kind of also happened, you know, with when the drill movement started popping in Chicago.
Let me just grab the phone.
Okay. You know, this was kind of in 2012. Like, there was all these drill show, like all the labels were coming to sign like Chief Keef or Little Durk or Little Reese. Like, the labels just kept calling me, and they were just looking to get anybody like that in Chicago.
Right.
Like, we just want a drill artist, somebody that's like Chief Keef. It doesn't have to be Chief Keef, just somebody
so
like
weird.
Chief Keef. And I'd be like, all right, guys, that's fine. And you do need to pay attention to that, because that's what's like hot in the city right now. But like, there's like a kid named Chance the Rapper who's, you know, he's selling out 500 cap rooms and doesn't even have a mixtape yet.
Right.
You know, so like there's other stuff going on here, but it took them years to figure that out. Like, people just, you know, They don't wait. They won't jump on something until the right people say it's cool.
And like the type of people that go get a job at a label are not necessarily like trend-setting visionaries that are going to, you know, be mindful of what is going to happen next. They just know, I have a job. I want to keep this job for the next 6 months. So maybe I got to find a guy with dreads and sign him. Yeah,
yeah. Got to play it safe.
But so, what was your? So you just started a blog? Like, how did this go down?
I just started it. Like, I literally one morning, I woke up. I was like hungover, and then the name Fake Shore Drive popped in my head, because it was, you know, based on Lakeshore Drive, which is like a famous, you know, road in Chicago.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm just gonna call it that, and I'll just start writing, because, you know, the hardest part is like taking the chance to do it, because you're like, is this dorky? Is like because blogging was definitely not cool then.
Yeah.
Like that was definitely not.
And a lot of people
like,
really didn't even understand.
They didn't
what
understand
it was. Yeah.
And so I would go to these events, and like, you know, a lot of the older rappers in Chicago, I'd be like, yeah, send me your music and I'll like put it online. They're like, to do what? To give it away for free?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, kind of, yeah, it's like that. But they didn't even get the concept of like putting a video on YouTube at the time. Like they were still trying to figure out how to get on MTV Jams or, you know, BET or whatever. And they were still like
in between period where they're still selling tapes out the car and shit, right?
Yeah. I mean, pulling up in front of venues selling like hard copy mixtapes and stuff like that.
And that still kind of worked at the time. But then, you know, people like us who are on the internet, we're looking at the internet and being like, this is clearly the future.
This is the future. Like, pay attention. And then, like, some people got it. Some people understood. Some people, it took some time to get what I was trying to do.
So did you have, like, the format that you guys became known for where it's super hyper-local and just kind of aggregating content? Or what were you trying to do in the very beginning?
Dan, just to put on for Chicago so people could see what was happening there.
Right. And
because, you know, the blog game wasn't as saturated as it is now or was even 5 years ago. You know, 10 years ago, it was there, but still people were kind of all doing the same thing, right? They were covering national stuff. So I was like, well, how can I be different?
Right.
Because I'm just not going to write if I write about what everything, you know, there's already an Outright, there's already a Two Dope Boys, and they're covering everything. Like, I got to separate myself somehow.
Right.
And so I focused just on Chicago. And people thought I was crazy. People were like, this is not going to work. Like, you're going to be out of business. I mean, it was just a hobby. It wasn't like I ever thought I would be able to do it full time.
In 2007, you're not thinking about how you could monetize this really, because it seemed almost impossible.
No,
right? Yeah.
I just wanted to see if, like, I wanted to have a creative outlet because I had a corporate job that I didn't like. I just thought maybe I could go to some shows for free.
Right.
Or, meet some people.
Skip that line around the block for the cool kids. Yeah.
Right. And just, have some kind of like creative, freedom and do some cool things and do some writing because I was stuck at a job that I didn't like.
What were you doing at the time?
Ad sales.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That is pretty soul draining, huh?
I mean, and I'm not knocking anybody because people love it. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
My heart was in music, and I had to try to figure out how to do it.
Right.
So thankfully, I was able to eventually make that happen.
So when did you start to feel like you were getting some traction?
It was when I could get in touch with like No ID and the legendary Trackster, and I think one time that was really cool was Twista got me a birthday cake.
Really?
Yeah.
So what? He sends it to you, or
we were we had this joint like birthday party.
Really?
It was like his party, but he invited me because our birthdays are right around each other.
Right.
And he's like, "Yo, just come to my party tonight. It's your birthday. We'll hang out." And like I went, and they had like a cake for me. They had like a Fake Short Drive logo on it.
Wow.
And it was like happy birthday from Twista and the Get Money Gang, which is like his label.
Right.
So that was like.
And so 2007, had you even like met any rappers, or was it all brand new to you?
It was still pretty brand new. I'd met people, you know what I mean, but like, who's this guy? Mm-hmm. I had no connections. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know one rapper.
Yeah.
I think Chuck English was like the first guy that I met.
Right.
And he showed love. He was cool, but like, I was just a fan.
Yeah.
And so I really, think that part of my success has been because I still look at it like as a fan.
Right.
I approached it as a fan.
Yeah. And they respect your point of view. That's like a big thing, I think, for somebody who kind of feels like an outsider coming in, is that you really have to earn the respect of these dudes and and show that you're not, culture vulture or whatever, that you actually have a genuine interest. And I think by going underground and shining light on people who aren't already commercially successful, that's probably the most easy way to prove that you are actually a fan of the culture.
Yeah, because now it's like anybody can get involved, right?
Yeah.
But like still even 10 years ago, like you had to earn your spot at the table.
Right.
It's like if you're a white guy trying to get in here and do this, like you got to know what you're talking about or we're not going to respect you. Like,
right.
You can't sit at the table with us unless you actually know, your history, your hip hop, and you have good taste.
Right.
But like now anybody can just jump in the game.
Right. So at that time, there's like this interim between you starting the site and then the Chief Keef explosion, which shined a whole different light on Chicago, made Chicago rap look so completely different compared to like Kanye and Lupe Fiasco. Was Chief Keef a reaction to that kind of hip hop being so popular, Cool Kids and all that stuff? Was it a reaction in your opinion?
Now, I think if you look at like kind of like the history of Chicago hip hop, the streets play a big role in Chicago. Obviously, everybody knows that. It's what's on the news all the time. But like there wasn't like a real street artist that ever emerged.
Right.
Like something would happen. Like Bump J. Are you familiar with Bump J? It's like Bump J was like got $1 million deal,
and he's still in jail, but maybe getting out soon.
He's
right?
supposed to be out like the top of next year, is what I hear.
I loved Bump J. At
I
the
did
time
too.
that he was popping off.
Yeah,
that was
and
huge.
so he was still around. He was like the first artist to like co-sign Fake Short Drive. So they found it. I mean, I think he was like Vanity.
You helped him rob that bank. You were in on that.
That was pre-Fake Short Drive. No comment. But I think they were like Vanity Googling himself or something like that, and they stumbled upon me writing about him.
Right.
And then like they emailed me like they were like, "Yo, we rock with what you're trying to do. Like here's an exclusive." And so then they just started sending me music, and then a few months later is when he got locked up.
Really?
And he hasn't been out since.
So you're saying that like the shit because allegedly he robbed a bank or whatever, that's what he's in jail for. Mm-hmm. You're saying that was before his music career started to take off?
He did it like as his so he got signed in like 04, 05.
Right.
He was supposed to be like the 50 Cent of Chicago, the street guy. Like Leo Cohen flew out to Chicago and like was driving around neighborhoods looking for him.
Wow.
And they gave him $1 million deal.
Wow.
And Kanye was doing his album. And he was back and forth between here and L.A. And then, something happened with the label. They didn't like it, or, they thought he was too much trouble because they had a really crazy reputation in Chicago. And it was another thing, like they couldn't do shows in Chicago because there would be fights or, somebody would get shot outside or something like that. So his thing fell apart. Then he went to jail for robbing the bank. Just as he was about to come, have this resurgence with No ID and good music, and he was kind of affiliated with them a little bit, and then that all fell apart.
Yeah, because he had like Kanye verses at one point, right?
Yeah, I mean, Kanye produced like 4 or 5 songs on what was going to be his Atlantic debut.
It could have been huge. Yeah, it's crazy.
It could have been. I think everybody was betting the house on him. So like that was kind of like a false start. So he didn't happen. And I mean, Twista is kind of a street artist, right? But like he still is known for like slow jams and overnight celebrity. Like he wasn't like his street songs weren't the ones that made him famous. So I think that kind of side of Chicago had been suppressed nationally for a long time. And Keef was just right there at the right time, the right moment.
And do you remember when you first encountered his stuff? Because like the narrative was always like, oh, like Chief Keef is coming from the high schools, like that's where his fan base is, and that's why he has 200,000 views on this video on YouTube. Because I remember real early on seeing his stuff, and it was a couple 100,000 views, but people were like, this is the kids in Chicago. This is really coming from that.
And I was like, you would see those views, and I'd be like, man, these views, are these real? People are buying these views.
Back then, motherfuckers were buying views
hard views they were buying. But it's like, yo, these kids don't have credit cards. These kids aren't buying views. They don't know how to do that. Like, this was real. And like, you could just ask around, and like there was like they were super popping on the streets, and like, it was a real movement. And, some of the early stuff, I think is really dope now, but you look at it, it doesn't even look like Chicago. I mean, it looks like some of it looks like a third world country almost. The videos were just so crazy. Like, they're in torn down buildings with guns, and they're all like little kids. And it was just.
It was so jarring. Like you could see how even somebody who really hated the music would still make a huge impact on them. They would be horrified by seeing some of that stuff.
Right. It's like you could never forget it.
Yeah, exactly.
You could never forget it. And I
like
think,
it or not.
Yeah, and I think it had the whole backstory, right?
Right.
So, he's the 16-year-old. People thought the cops had killed him. He, I guess, had been in jail for shooting at a cop, was on house arrest, lived with his grandmother, had a kid. So he had this like just crazy backstory. And I think that helped sell it. And then the music was good.
When you first saw it, were you into it? Or were you kind of like, I don't know about this? Because it's so different than a lot of the stuff you were into at the time, probably.
It was so different. There was nothing like it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it was not the traditional Chicago sound.
Right.
It wasn't the Kanye soulful type of vibe. I mean, this was like sounded like the next generation of like Waka Flocka and Gucci Mane. I mean, it was more influenced by the Southern stuff.
Totally.
But yeah, I was drawn to it. At first, I was like a little like trying to figure out like what about it the kids love so much.
Right.
But they just could relate to him.
Did it produce like a huge schism in Chicago in between, the people who were making stuff that was more, conscious or whatever, however you want to describe something like Lupe or Kanye? Did it draw a line in the sand between these guys?
Yeah, it was. See, the thing about when all Keef and all those other guys and King Louie and Reese and everybody, when they started taking off, there was other rappers in line that had been working for years.
Building a real craft,
like working that had been, putting in their time and effort and, thinking that they were getting blog posts. And it's like, okay, we're probably going to get signed next. We'll be the next act to emerge. And then it was like, they started getting older. Then all of a sudden, boom, these kids just show up.
Yeah.
And they just destroy the party.
Right.
And so, like, you had all the older rappers that maybe hadn't made it or it didn't really work out for them were pissed off.
Right.
And so like a lot of the backlash started from like industry people within Chicago who were like, who are these kids? They didn't pay any dues. They're rapping about violence.
They're barely rapping some of the time.
Right. They're barely rapping. They're saying the same line over and over again.
Yeah.
It sounds like Southern rap. And so it just created this huge divide.
Right.
And it was kind of like us against them.
Uh-huh.
And, us covering it rubbed some people the wrong way.
I bet they were looking at you like you were kind of taking advantage by even promoting stuff that was sort of inherently violent.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with playing both sides of that? Because obviously you wanted to keep representing for the conscious dudes too.
And that's what I did. I mean, I let them know, hey, look, we're covering everything. We're not just, but you can't ignore it. And I always thought it was weird when people would try to say, you should leave them alone. You should not, like, you really want to suppress these kids? Like, you don't want these kids to get their messages out, regardless if you think you don't agree with what they're saying. Like, they need to have a voice, and people need to know this is what's going on in Chicago.
Right. So was that has that divide gotten more significant or less significant over the years?
Less significant.
So it's more of a blurred thing now?
Yeah. I mean, I think, because they had their time, and then it was like, Chance and Vic Mensa and all those guys like to Save Money, Joey Perp, and, there's so many other people that are popping. Like, you got Mick Jenkins and Saba and No Name and G Herbo and Bibby.
Right.
So you have like a lot of different pockets of people doing it. So it's not, and the coverage is more balanced. The thing that kind of upset me was like the coverage was just of the drill. The outside media publications that were really exploiting it were only covering the negative, and so that created even more bad attention. And I think that's what made a lot of people upset too,
right?
Because it was like, hey, there is other stuff going on here, and I think once that coverage got balanced,
right,
it kind of chilled everybody out.
But it's interesting because Chance is like by far the biggest post-Keef superstar coming out of Chicago, but he is so far on the other side. Like he's about as far away from drill as you could ever possibly imagine. He's almost like gospel rapper, super positive and nice and a great representative for the city. Obviously, like a better role model than a lot of the drill guys. Somebody you'd rather have your kid listening to. But he went so far left. Like, when did you start to see him emerge? And
I mean, he was around the whole time.
Right. Oh, okay.
He was around, like, I knew Vic Mensa since he was like 15.
Okay.
Right. So I knew him when he was a child.
Right.
And I probably met Chance around when he was like 17 or 18, something like that. Like either he was about to graduate high school or he had just graduated high school. Mm-hmm. It was pre-10 day because he was in a group called Instrumentality, which was a duo. And we used to cover him on the site. His first manager, matter of fact, used to be a writer for Fake Shore Drive, a guy named Matt Lyman.
Okay.
Used to be a writer for Fake Shore Drive. And so he put me on to Chance. And so he brought him to my office like late 2011 to meet him for the first. And I think he hadn't even put out a video yet. Mm-hmm. But he's like, you got to meet this kid. And like he definitely, when he walked in, like I was like, this kid's going to be a star.
Really?
You know, I knew he was going to be big. I mean, I didn't know he was going to be like the most famous person I knew in my life. You know what I mean? He's become like the most famous person in Chicago.
Yeah, probably.
It's like he can't. You know, anytime he shows up anywhere, he just shuts it down. It's like a riot happens. Right. I knew he was going to be big, and I could just tell by some of the stuff that they were doing. Like he would go to like high schools and sell tickets to his shows. So like before he even had a mixtape out, like he was selling out like 400 cap rooms.
Really?
And he would go to different high schools and sell the tickets hand to hand.
Wow.
You know, where a rapper's usually way too cool to do something like that and like actually get out and hustle and sell their tickets. He didn't. He was connecting with his fans, so he was building something bigger.
Wow.
So it was really unique what he was doing.
Right.
And so, he was doing his thing, and those Save Money guys were definitely popping around that time. And then you kind of had G Herbo and like Bibby, who were starting to take off and do their thing as well. And they were kind of labeled as drill, but they're really not drill. They're more of like a lyrical type of thing. And then you had the females like Tink and Dreezy.
Right.
Katie got banned, Sasha Go Hard. So there was a lot of different stuff happening at the time.
Yeah. So was that the Chief Keef thing took like a weird turn because all of a sudden he's kind of like exiled from Chicago, in the very early stages of his career. So how did that play out from your perspective? He blows up and then all of a sudden he's like banned from Chicago more or less.
He's banned. He can't do any shows. 2012 he did Pitchfork, he did Lollapalooza, and then he's gone. Right. He had to get out of Chicago. It was just too much. Like he was getting arrested all the time. Cops were always at his house. They moved out to the suburbs. There was even more trouble out there. So it was like, all right, like he's got to get out of Chicago. It's just too hot. Even if he's in the suburbs, people know where he lives. And it was just somebody got shot at his house, and he lived in like one of the nicer suburbs, the North Shore suburbs in Chicago. And like somebody got shot at his house in like this neighborhood where you've never.
That kind of thing doesn't happen.
Like you got like coyotes in your backyard and skunks, and like there's like birds, and nobody's getting shot.
Right.
The biggest crime somebody's gonna have is like a DUI.
Right.
And here comes Keef and his crew, and they're riding 4-wheelers through the front yard and through the backyard. So they had to get out of there. And then once he left, a lot of different things happened between the artists. They all got deals, and I think once like the labels got involved and like, when they were all together making music, it was beautiful, right? The music was great.
Right.
Everybody was kind of playing their roles, but like once people saw that they could make money from them, whether it be managers or labels or production, groups, whatever, come in, and it broke up the chemistry.
And I think there was a feeling too that it was almost like it was unfair that Keef became so huge, whereas like it could have been Fredo, it could have been Reese at that time. Was that kind of the vibe too?
No, because I think everybody thought that they were going to get it. Obviously, Keef was like the figurehead, and I think a lot of those other guys were maybe upset that he got all the looks, but he had the biggest songs. I mean, that's just what it is. He had the biggest songs, and he had that crazy backstory, and the media just bought into it. But then like the chemistry changed. it just people started beefing, rival crews started getting into it, and there was jealousy and hatred, and then that kind of like that scene just kind of imploded.
It's kind of a weird tale for like the youth in Chicago too, though, because Keef comes out and here's a guy who all of a sudden has all the opportunity in the world, and he doesn't give a fuck. And right. he's got, you know, the moment that like personified it to me was when he had the video shoot with Wiz and 50 in the desert, and he just blows him off to presumably do nothing, to sit in his house because he didn't feel like it, because he's just that kind of guy who's just not going to listen to anybody.
Right.
But that's kind of a weird thing for the Chicago scene, I feel like, too, because he could have been this huge star, and instead he just basically ignored Interscope, fucking didn't give a shit about what
he was like anti-industry.
Yeah.
Like the industry wanted to play ball, but he wasn't going to play ball.
Right. And he puts out that album that has all these big fucking hits on it. Yeah. Presumably the label helped him like make that, because it's definitely like the most easy to comprehend project that he's ever had, that he's ever put out. Do you think that almost had like a weird effect on the scene, because people are looking at him like, oh, you're the one who's going to make it, and then he just clearly doesn't give a shit about making it.
Right. And he was, you know, I just think it definitely, I think people taught people a lesson, like, you know, if you have these opportunities, you can't squander them. But Keef is still like a cult-like figure. I mean, people like wanted to say that he was going to be done. People wanted to be like, he's done.
Right.
He got dropped from Interscope. He's a knucklehead. Like, he's done. We don't, you know, I think that's what people wanted. They wanted him to fail. And that's what kind of upset me. People like wanted him to fail, and he didn't. You know, maybe you don't agree with his content or you don't like him, but like, you know, you shouldn't want to see one of these. You want to see this kid make it,
right?
And because once they start seeing other things and touring and getting around the world, like their point of view is going to change, and they can help other people. But it just didn't work out like that. But then, you know, he drops Finito.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, became this internet legend hitmaker all of a sudden. And
earned it. Got like, what, 50 million views on YouTube. So, like, he still has like a song. Whenever he drops something, it goes off, and you're going to hear it in the streets.
Right.
So he's still an icon.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. It kind of reminds me of like the Soulja Boy trajectory, where he was the biggest underground, like, internet rapper at a certain point, where he takes his fame from his major label hits and then just becomes this internet legend. And Keef sort of did the same thing, but in a very different way.
Yeah, in a different way. He definitely played it by his own rules.
Yeah. So from your perspective, I'm interested in how Fake Shore was growing as a business all along this way too, because you opened up offices in Chicago, and you just kind of like, how did you start to monetize, and how did you see the progress of that going?
Yeah, I think let's see, when did I quit my job? I did it full time. I started doing it full time in like 2010, 2011.
Okay.
I was able to get it there where I could, you know, because I was doing both. I was living like a double life.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was going into work, putting on a suit if I had to, and, you know, I was running it from my desk.
Right.
Like, I was running Fake Shore Drive, like, you know.
And they had no idea?
They had no idea.
Right.
And like, even like for a while, like, they had blocked it, so I couldn't like get onto like WordPress. So like, I got like a Go to My PC account. Like, so I was like logging on like through Go to My PC onto my computer at home so I could still update.
Right.
Because I had to update it every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to have a successful blog at that time, you had to do, you know, 10, 20 posts a day.
Yeah. And were you doing them all yourself, or you start getting interns right away?
Yeah, like around 2010 is when Ty came on, and some guy named Ty who's been around ever since. And, you know, we've had different writers, but pretty much mainly me and then Ty for sure. Like, we're doing it. I mean, I still update it to this day every day. So I was able to quit around then. My wife was the one that really, she was not my wife then, but she was the one that really pushed me to do it, to like, she's like, you got to do it now. We don't have kids. We're not married. Like, if you don't take this chance and try to at least do it full time now, you know, you're never going to do it.
Right.
So just do it. If you fail, I got you.
Right.
You know, she has a job, so she could support us if something went wrong. So, you know, everybody tried to talk me out of it.
That's a hell of a woman you got in your hands.
I know,
there.
right?
That's very rare. That they'd be like, nah, chase your dreams, buddy.
Yeah, go for it. And you know, thank God she did, and I did it, and thankfully it worked out, because it could have gone very badly. But, you know, around that time is when I joined the Complex Network, so I started getting like official ads in.
Right.
You know, I wasn't having to go to like gas stations and meet guys with bags of, you know, money for.
Was that
ads.
it for a while? That's how you started to monetize it first? Was you were like getting banner ad campaigns from some random dude?
Yeah, right.
Wow.
You know, some D-boy rapper that would be like, "Yo, man, I want to buy the skin for a month."
Right.
And you could just throw out a crazy number and they would do it because they didn't know.
Right.
But I would, you know, let them know and try to school them and not take advantage of people or anything like that. But, you know, it was a little bit of that, running those, you know, little, you know, grocery bag drop-offs for ads on the site or whatever.
Wow, that's cool.
So then I joined Complex. The ad money started coming in through that, and then then I started working with brands, and that's what I really enjoyed doing.
Okay.
Probably, my biggest client or partner that I work with is Red Bull.
Okay.
Which is why I'm in LA right now.
Right, because you're doing a show with them. But what kind of stuff have you done with them in general? How do you work with brands? Because that's so much harder to navigate than just getting an ad network for like the type of person. I don't know if any kids watching this are ever going to start the next big hip hop blog, but
because that's kind of dead. That's kind of over with.
Well, we can talk about that too. But so how do you go about working with brands? Like, describe what that's like.
For example, with Red Bull, what I do is I'm part of was one of the first curators for this program that they have called Sound Select, right? So, they go to different markets, and it started just in 4 markets, and I'm going on my 5th year working on this with them. And it's to promote independent rising artists. So, like, they'll give you a budget to do a show, and say, okay, get a big headliner, and then we want to bring on 2 local artists who are like on the rise, and then we're going to bring them through the Red Bull system. We're going to get them on shows. We're going to put them in the studio with other people. We're just going to try to give them an opportunity because there's not as much money in the music industry, and we want to do cool stuff. And we're not trying to overly brand it or anything like that. So some of the artists that I brought in to Sound Select, I brought Chance in. Save Money, Joey Perp, G Herbo, Bibby, Mick Jenkins, Saba. So like Lucky X, like a lot of the different, rappers who've been hot in Chicago, I've brought them through that system.
Wow.
Smino, they've had great success. They've been on tours with them. And, I underpromise and overdeliver. So every show that we do sells out. It's crazy. Line down the street. With a lot of special guests, and just give them what they want, give them more than what they want, and they've been great to me, and that's why I'm here in LA doing the show tonight.
That's dope. So you introduced yourself into like a very precarious position early on, though, where a lot of people are looking at you like, oh, you can make a rapper famous.
Yeah.
So let's fucking, number one, send this guy every fucking song that we ever make, and number two, like, presumably put yourself in a position where somebody's going to want to fucking hurt you for ignoring you.
No, for sure.
So talk about that. Like, fucking probably got real intense real quick, I bet.
Yeah, so you were where my office was.
Yeah.
Right? And I got rid of that office. I don't have that office anymore. Because everybody knew where it was.
Right.
Right? And, I would have to try to time it to go when, like, I didn't think people would, like, I had to go, like, really early in the morning and, like, get out of there by, like, 2 or 3 o'clock because people just come knock on my door all day. And, like, if I didn't lock it, like, I'd always have to lock it, but if I didn't lock it, like, people just walk in.
Right.
So, like, people would just, like, walk in and start rapping. So people would just bust through the door and just, like, they'd start putting on a show. And it was like, I'm like, dude, this is so weird. Like, I'm not Russell Simmons. Like, I can't, like, write you a check.
Yeah.
And so people thought I could, like, they had to go through me to get to the door of the industry or whatever. And so people were, like, nonstop. Like, people would recognize me at the grocery store. I'd be... with my wife, and like, somebody would just like try to give me a CD, and it just started getting kind of weird. And so like, I got to keep a kind of a lower profile because, everybody wants to be a rapper now, and especially after the success of Keef and, Fredo and all those guys.
Made it seem like anybody could do it.
Anybody could do it, right? And everybody wants to. So there's like 1 million rappers in Chicago, so.
Right. So is that still like kind of an issue, or do you have to watch the way you move a lot because of this type of thing?
I mean, I think you have to do it. You have to watch the way you move in Chicago just in general.
Yeah.
I mean, just because anything can happen at any time, but, I don't get involved with any of that stuff. I'm a nice guy.
Right.
I've never ripped anybody off. I've never taken money for a post. I've never, try to sign these kids. I don't try to put them on paperwork. And that's what people always tell me, like, you need to sign these kids and start getting paid off them. But I'm like, dude, that's not...
It's too much. It's too complicated. You can't play both sides, be the media and the label.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
But people think it's that simple because a lot of people like to, whether they'll admit it or not, they like to take advantage of these kids. But, like, I'm trying to help them and, like, don't sign that contract maybe. Like, don't do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because, they don't know. Most kids that are getting in the music industry don't know. I think people are more educated today about it, but there's sharks. There's a lot of the old school guys in Chicago that would just want to, they see blood in the water and they're going to try to get in and sign them and, take away, put them on some crazy like 10 album contract or something like that.
Getting paid for a post though, was it kind of a tough decision to make in the beginning of like, oh, I need to be very careful about my journalistic integrity in the way I run this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because I've had people offer me all kinds of money and all kinds of crazy stuff to get posts, but it's not worth it. Right. I wouldn't be still in business if I was taking money.
Yeah.
And you just learn from like a lot of the older Chicago DJs that were taking money to play people's stuff on the radio, and people get shanked and beat up.
Really?
And, you start playing with people's money that people feel like they own you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like, they gave you $1,000 for, a post or a couple posts. And then, remember that time I gave you $1,000?
Yeah.
Like, you need to
It'd be a shame if people knew about that.
Right.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it could get hairy. It could get scary. So,
right.
I just stay away from that type of stuff, man. I just do good business and try to help people and, use the power for good.
Right. So from your perspective, it's really interesting because you've seen blogs go from this. There was like a moment in 2007, 2008, that area where they were all that mattered, where this was like the sole bastion of fucking trend setting in terms of hip hop, and their role has changed a lot. So, when did you start to notice that social media was changing everything, and how has that changed the way you run your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think within the last couple of years, it's really changed. Uh-huh. I mean, and definitely within the last year.
Yeah.
Just the from Twitter and Instagram, people have their own followings on there, right? And now you have Twitter personalities releasing music. People are not going to blogs anymore, or if they're going to blogs, they're going to one of the big four. They're going to Fader or Complex or Noisy or Pitchfork or something like that,
Right.
Whereas a lot of the, independent blogs, they're not getting those looks anymore.
Right.
Because now, once all the bigger sites saw that, and you can't compete with a site that has all this crazy traffic and has 30 employees.
And they're just going to put the shit on SoundCloud anyway. So it's like, even if you did get an exclusive, then Complex is just going to take it if they want it. So it's,
And then now, you can just follow the artist that you want.
Yeah.
And you can just follow them, and you don't have to go to a blog. People want the content right there. And you don't have to leave your Twitter timeline to listen or watch stuff now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And people choose their own little world that they want to live in, where they only get notified about those stuff that they, or, you could see 50 links in your to new songs in your Twitter feed in one day,
right.
And none of them seem imperative for you to click on besides the artist that you already know about, right. Or featuring an artist that you already know about. Mm-hmm. It's very tough to get people's attention. So
because there's so much noise out there now.
Yeah.
And I could see that changing, so I'm like, okay, I need to kind of change my model, how I'm doing this. So then I started getting in, working with more, companies, whether it be, Vans or Hennessy or Ciroc or Beats by Dre. I was a brand ambassador for them. People saw a lot of the good work I was doing for different companies, and they would want to come in. And so the stuff that people told me I was crazy for in the beginning, you just focusing on Chicago or being in Chicago is going to be the kiss of death for you. You're never going to succeed.
Right.
But it's no, it's been very beneficial because I'm the guy in Chicago, right? So they're calling me because they want to try to get in the market.
Yeah.
I could have come to New York or LA, and it probably wouldn't have worked. Nobody would have cared. So
that never seemed tempting. I'm going to move to New York and maybe try to make this more of a national thing, try to make it huge.
Yeah, but I mean, everybody leave. So many people leave Chicago. You got to have people there.
Yeah.
You got to have people there. And I think I carved out a niche, and I have my own thing there. And I don't know if it would make sense to leave.
Yeah.
Because I can come out here all the time, but I think maybe I could hit a ceiling. But I think with the internet, it makes it easier, right?
Right.
I mean, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, I don't think I would have been able to do all the stuff that I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. But it's made it much easier with social media and stuff like that. Yeah. Where me and you can connect, who have known each other but never really met. We can just, holler at each other on Twitter, and then here we are.
Yeah.
It's just the beauty of it is, you can get information out so much faster.
Yeah, it is crazy. So do you focus on social media a lot? And I feel like the change has been that now it's personality, and personalities and that individual perspective is so much more powerful to the kids. And I've seen it with my BMX website and everything too, is that there are kids with a YouTube channel who can get 1 million views on every video that they do of them just hanging out with their friends, and that ends up being a lot more of a persuasive force than just a website that posts, that aggregates everything that happened that day.
And so it's changing. Everything's going to video. People are just going straight to YouTube to put their stuff out, right? I mean, your stuff gets crazy views, and you have like a really cool following on there, and that's tough to do with a podcast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I had a podcast years ago with David Drake and Ernest Wilkins.
You know what? I used to listen to that back in the day. Yeah. That's crazy. I think that was, I was sat here with Combat Jack the other day and said that his was the first podcast that I ever listened to, but I was thinking in my head, I'm like, there was a fucking Chicago one, but I can't remember exactly what it was called.
Disrespectful Radio.
There you go, yeah. And I remember when you had Katie Got Bands on there, and I remember that she accidentally acknowledged that she had a job.
And then she worked at McDonald's.
Yeah, oh, that was it, yeah. And then she was like, because she was like, oh, I got to go to work later. Oh, wait, I can't say that. Yeah. And I thought that was so fucking hilarious.
She worked at the McDonald's on Navy Pier.
Wow. Yeah. I wonder if that became strange for her pretty quickly. She's doing videos with gunplay and shit.
I think that was like the last time. I don't think she ever went to that job after that.
Really?
After that like came out. But yeah, I mean, we had Yams on the show.
Yes, you did. Yeah, I remember.
We had one of the first early Yams interviews.
That might have been the first one I listened to.
Yeah. It was a really cool show. And then, David Drake moved to New York to go work for Complex.
Right.
And then we just had to stop it. But it was like, it was fun. I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
So to see somebody like you have so much success with it, and because it's a labor of love, and it's difficult to keep a following and do it all the time. So.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing to be kind of known, because now I sort of look at myself as more of an overall YouTuber who the base of it is doing interviews, which is kind of a strange thing, because there's a lot of YouTubers who are real popular because they started doing pranks, or they started to do other like weird little trends. Mm-hmm. Interviews is a strange way to come into like making content in general.
Yeah, and I think even your style of how you do it now, people are copying it.
You think?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think so.
I don't see these haters. What about David Drake though? I had him on the podcast, and he's sort of like a similar role to you, but like he was really writing and trying to like express a lot of the stuff that was going on in Chicago at that time. Like, do you ever think of yourself as like a real writer? Like you wanted to kind of go in that direction that he was doing, of like just doing freelance stuff for other people? Or
Drake is a shout out to him. He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
But he's like serious about the writing. Like, and he's like an old school journalist. Like,
he's a purist.
If it's like there's any kind of conflict, like, well, I can't work with a brand because that's a conflict. I can't So like he's like has those like morals where I look at it more like a blogger. Like I'm not really a journalist, so there's certain things that I can and can't do like that. I'll cross those lines. I don't necessarily care, but he has that, and he's a really good writer. I mean, he's one of the better writers I think of today. I mean, he's amazing. So he kind of looked at it from a different perspective. Like he was really going in depth.
Right.
Where I try to say, I was not like a journalist. I taught myself how to write because I was doing the blogs every day. And I can write. I don't necessarily, it's not like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
I can if I want to. But my thing is trying to say the most with saying the least. I'm trying to make like really wordy things. I just try to be direct about it.
Do you ever get sick of like the grind of running a website? Because listening to new artists all the time must be strange too, because that's almost like your job is to help new artists get out there, and it's kind of you're listening to music. When music listening becomes your job, it's a strange thing.
Yeah. It's like it takes it's hard to be a fan anymore because you're constantly critiquing everything and you're looking at it in a different way.
From like a business perspective, And
so like I'm not listening to it like as a fan anymore. So my ears, the way that I hear or digest content is so different now because I'm thinking about it differently. I'm looking at it differently. I'm going to shows and I'm watching the performance in a different way than I used to.
You're thinking like, could this guy be popular? Could this guy...
Could this work? That's not going to work, but this could work. And, so my mind is like, I've like rewired my brain. So to answer your question, yes, I do get sick of doing the day-to-day blogging.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily, I mean, do you feel the same way? Or?
I don't feel any pressure to listen to new artists until they actually reach a point where it seems like they're connecting with the people to a level where it might be important for me too, because I don't listen to the music that gets submitted. Do you do that? Do you like, you're sitting in
Yeah, but like, I get so many, and it's so much, it's so bad. I mean, and I hate to say this,
it's almost impossible.
I mean, sometimes you can just find like a needle in a haystack, where it's like, oh my god, like this is actually a good submission, but I don't know how. Like sometimes I've clicked on stuff and it was like, you find this gem, and then other times, most of the time, it's just like it's a lot of just terrible stuff. There's no heart in it to it, They're like you can just tell by the way they're rapping, like they're not really even interested in it. They're just trying to be cool. And
it's tough when you gotta listen to 99 shit songs to find one that is half decent, and also it's tough when it's songs as opposed to videos, because I feel like with a video it's a lot easier for me to make make like a real judgment call on like if I think you're dope or not.
Yeah, it's a lot easier, and it just I feel like I've been doing it so long that I kind of have a method to the madness, and I can almost eyeball something and be like, that's not going to be good.
Yeah, like it's almost like. It just stands out to you so much when you see something that could work or that people are going to like. Right. It's not really even a matter of opinion. It's just whether it's good or not.
Right.
And
I think my track record. I mean, I've had a good track record of discovering these artists in Chicago and putting them on and telling people about them. That I think that I've kind of have a good eye for that.
Right.
And so I try to keep up with it as much as I can.
You ever have a conversation with Kanye?
I have.
How was that? Let's hear about it.
I've had a few conversations with Kanye. They're always interesting.
And he gets what you do, or
I don't know. Like, okay, one time we talked and he was like really nice and he was like, oh, that's cool, blah, blah, blah. And like, we have mutual friends. So I know all his people and I've been, backstage at his shows and I've been around him a number of times. But like, I don't know. It's always like there was that one point where like he wasn't talking to people,
to anyone,
like he wasn't like talking. He was like just nodding his head.
Yeah,
it's like I one of the times. This is like probably 2012, 2013.
Silent movie combo with Kanye.
They were like Kanye wants to say hello or whatever. Like, and this is at the Staples Center. Like after like Watch the Throne,
right?
Like the Kardashians were back there, and like Stevie Wonder was back there. It was just like the weirdest situation I'd ever been in. There's all these like real celebrities, not to say that Chicago celebrities aren't real, but it's like like this is Hollywood people. Yeah. These aren't people that are in Chicago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I went up to him, he was just kind of sitting in the corner by himself, and he was just having like people come in and like say hi to him. And I went up to him and they were like, "Yeah, Andrew's here," and he just like bowed his head and like shook my hand. Like gave me a hug and then like nodded his head in like approval, and then that was it.
And you can't really tell if that's like a genuine appreciation for what you're doing, or is that just a quick way to get rid of me?
Yeah, I don't know. But like they was doing the same thing to like so. And then I saw him a couple years later, and he was cool. I mean, I don't bother him. He's
so big now. Do you still see his fingerprints on a lot of the artists coming out? Because when he says there's so many Kanyes, and like Chance is the most obvious one, who is somebody who like could not have existed the way that he does if it wasn't for Kanye sort of breaking down the barriers of what a rapper was. Do you see his influence directly in a lot of artists now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and more so than in the fashion.
Right.
I mean, that's how he's been able to transcend these. I mean, he's like the god to these kids.
Right.
They all want to dress like him. They all, want to market stuff like him. I mean, so he's still like the overlord of Chicago. I mean, you want to see how people act when he comes in town.
I bet.
I mean, people just like freak out.
Right.
And it's like the male groupies are out.
Right.
So like, people are just hoping that he's going to throw him a bone.
Right. And we look at like the success of Yeezy and everything, and I think a lot of times we don't stop to take note of like, this is incredible what he's doing and what he's built. And like no rapper in recent times has been able to create a clothing line that anybody gave a shit about the way that he is now.
I mean, it's definitely not like Outkast clothing or like DMX, Irving Jeffrey.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So many failed clothing lines from like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Eminem had one. Outkast had one.
Yeah. Shady Limited had some of the worst fucking print ads ever in XXL. Oh my God.
You know what the worst one was?
What?
Machiavelli branded.
Yes. But that was after he died too, right?
Yeah. That was like 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was just like jeans, like the biggest like Jinko looking jeans that you've ever seen with like Tupac's face on them.
Shady Limited was just like, if you want to get addicted to OxyContin, this is what you need to wear, basically.
This is your uniform.
And that was like 2004 before I probably knew what that even was.
Yeah,
but it was, looking back at it now, I'm like, that's the uniform for sure.
Yeah.
So is like drill is a weird category, but is that still a big category in fucking Chicago? Or are there a lot of guys still kind of trying to fit that mold of being the most gangster motherfucker on earth?
They are, but it's not like what it was.
Right.
And I think it's changed. Like, you can't really put it in that box anymore. But like, I would say, the Save Money guys got it right now.
Right.
Like Chance and Vic and those guys, they're kind of like the hot ones. And like that whole scene with like Mick Jenkins and Saba, No Name, like they're the more conscious side. The people that came from new media, which is like the poetry scene and like that's kind of what's the kids are looking up to now.
Okay.
They kind of have the most influence in the city.
So
and I think like the drill stuff has kind of been pushed under the rug.
Yeah.
And then you got guys like Famous Dex who are doing their thing. So you have, it's just a lot of different stuff now. And it's cool to see that.
It's hard to even like separate like where Chief Keef and Famous Dex, like you might say like, oh, Dex isn't a drill rapper, but he has so many like similarities and clear like influence from somebody like Keef. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Dex is an interesting one.
And what's crazy is that it's 5 years. It's about to be the 5-year anniversary when all that stuff happened. So like,
such a short period of time, really.
To us now, right? Yeah. But like if you're a kid, that's the difference between being like in middle school and like through high school now to college.
Right.
You know what I mean? You've gone through high school at this point.
Yeah.
So like your life has changed. Your life from 30 to 35 doesn't change the way that it does when you're like, 10 to 15 or 15 to 20, right?
Yeah.
So it changes a lot differently. So like, what's going to happen?
Right.
Like, are the kids going to grow with them, or is it like, have people already moved on to the next thing?
Yeah.
Because it moves fast. The span of music, the lifespan of a hip hop artist, unless you're one of the greats, is like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And that's interesting for you because you've been actually in the industry for a lot longer than me, and you've seen that trajectory take place so many times. Yeah. And so do you like, what's your advice when you talk to like new young artists? Like, how do they stay relevant, or how do they try to make the most out of what they have? Because you only get to pop off once.
That's it.
Really.
And like if and the window's open, like you better get your full body through it. And like I think what a lot of people do is they get hot. They start getting some money, women, more people in their ears. They start getting lazy.
Yeah.
They start doing drugs.
They can afford way more drugs.
And so they get complacent. And they're not challenging themselves. They're not putting out the best music. Mm-hmm. And then, like, they get lazy, or they don't work on their stage show, so people don't go see them live. Yeah. And then it's easy to fall off. Then it's easy because there's so many rappers now, and they're coming out faster and faster, and they're getting younger and younger.
Yeah.
And, like, the industry is going to change. I've just from the decade that I've been doing it, it's changed over a few times already. And like people who were hot, when I started Fake Shore Drive,
could not sell 10 tickets to a show now.
Not
Some
anymore.
of the people who used to be able to do 500 or 1,000.
Yeah, right. Guys that were doing like the House of Blues 1,200 tickets. Now they're doing 300 cap rooms, if that. So it moves fast. So you got to take advantage of it. You got to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, and it's a weird decision for like a young artist too, though, because it's like you could either completely saturate the market and put out a new mixtape every 2 weeks, or you could hold back and try to be more rare with it. And it's a tough decision.
It's a fine line. I don't even know.
That's like the constant debate that I see. I feel like between kids is to go really hard or to pull back and try to make your project special. And it's like every different moment in your career calls for a different level of output, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you just got to be able to read it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to be able to see a few steps ahead. You have to be super forward thinking and kind of watch where it's going.
Right.
Because if you don't, you'll just, turn into a dinosaur.
Yeah, that's true. So from your perspective, how do you stay relevant, and what do you like, because do you feel like you're continuing to progress in terms of your business and in terms of the artistry of what you're doing? And like, what do you see yourself doing something completely different 5 years from now, or is it just a gradual progression?
I mean, it's just been a gradual progression, and people always ask me like, where do you think you're going to be in 5 years? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying to stay. You have to stay relevant. You always have to be reinventing yourself, right? Because if it gets stale, then people will move on.
Right.
And even as you get older, like, I'm way smarter and knowledgeable than I was 10 years ago, but like, I don't maybe not have the same, my priorities have changed, and maybe I don't have the time and the energy to go to all the shows and be out there, and I don't even want to be out there like that anymore. I got kids and stuff now, so like my lifestyle has changed significantly from even where I was like 4 years ago, right?
But is it? Do you think it's really important that you be visible and that you be at every show and stuff like that?
Not at every show.
Not every show.
I mean, I think you have to be rare with your appearances, and you have to, because I think sometimes like you show up places, people like they expect that like that's like a cosign, and then like their rates could go up or something like that. Like, oh, Barber's here at the show. Like this guy must be next. Like what
They're so thirsty, just trying to figure out what's going to pop off next that they need somebody to spell it out for them, right?
And then it's just a lot of sometimes it's not fun. So if I go to something and then like people are just in my ear the whole time, people are trying to talk business, they're trying to they got an artist. It's the same dudes who been trying to get in the industry for the past 20 years, and they got a new artist every couple years, and it's just like stop. Maybe you'll get one, but probably not.
It's a weird fine line between blocking it all out, which is where I sometimes feel like I'm at, like I won't I'm not clicking anybody's link. I'm not acknowledging any DMs versus wanting to be open to stuff and wanting to really pay attention.
Yeah.
It's just
it's a fine line.
Yeah.
It's a fine line. And as you see, everything's changing, right? I think even streaming has hurt like blogs, because I think people are looking to, just try to get on the Spotify Rap Caviar list now. People want to get on the playlist. I think people care more about maybe getting on, and I think even within the next couple of years, you're going to see that.
Yeah.
Because now people are just putting their music on Spotify or Apple Music, so there's more money coming in again.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be more money in the music business now.
And I know you don't like posting a fucking Spotify link in a blog post.
You know what? I don't mind that.
Okay.
I like it. I would prefer for the artist to get paid.
Yeah. But it's a pain in the ass because not everybody's going to be able to listen to it. And
Right.
it's like you're doing a blog post trying to hit as many people as possible. It's
Right.
different than a SoundCloud link.
Correct. But at the same time, man, I think, I saw a lot of people come and they had good stuff, but they couldn't they had a hard time making money.
Yeah.
But now I think they're starting to figure out how to make money again. And I want to see people succeed. Obviously everybody's not going to make it to the level of a Chance the Rapper.
Right.
Very few, if anybody, ever will make it to that type of level. But there should be people that are able to make a living doing it and be able to tour and, you don't have to be a superstar to make a living off, doing what you love and doing music.
Right.
And so that's kind of what we've always stood for, is to try to help those people.
Yeah. It's interesting because so you have LA and New York as like the main markets. Is Chicago number 3 or in that?
And the third biggest city in the U.S.?
Well, in terms of hip hop, like most relevant.
I would say, Atlanta's always relevant.
Atlanta, yeah, I'm fucking up.
Atlanta's probably number 1 because they know how to do. They can break an artist on the radio.
Yeah.
We still can't break artists on the radio in Chicago.
Really?
It's hard, and it's been difficult, and that's why we do the Shade 45 show.
Right.
It's to play, artists that are not getting radio play anywhere on a satellite station.
Yeah. And you were telling me before how like guys like Dirk have a hard time even playing shows in LA or in Chicago, and even he's somebody who's crossed over to a certain extent and has like some legitimate like radio hits and stuff like that.
Right.
But he's obviously got a crazy street rap and the cops probably hate him. Is that something that holds back Chicago to a certain extent, that you can't have this crazy violent content without the cops reacting in a way?
Yeah, and people lost so much money. I mean, people have lost so much money because they can't do shows. They can't do shows within like 60 miles of Chicago. Mm-hmm. Especially the drill artists.
Yeah.
And I think that will eventually change. But like I was supposed to do a talk with Lil Durk at the Apple Store on Michigan Avenue when his last album came out. And that got shut down like a couple hours before it was going to happen.
Right.
Somebody from the city or police department called Def Jam, was like, this is not happening.
Right.
There was already kids in line. And they had to go out there and tell them. And this is like the safest area in the city.
Yeah. And is this something where you think the cops have a genuine fear that the shit is going to get shot up? Or do you think it's just them having a vengeance against artists who have a certain type of content?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely... They are there's a lot of racist cops that don't like what they're doing, and there's always problems with the Chicago Police Department and in the black community in Chicago. There's documented kids are getting shot unfairly, and it's a mess. And so I think there's a lot of just power struggle between those two entities, and people don't want, when it starts getting closer to downtown, like, Michigan Avenue, they don't want any problem over there because that's where all the tourists come. That's where all the high-end shops are. So when it starts getting in their backyard, that's when they start getting, like, overly worried about it.
Yeah, you don't want to see the Apple Store get shot up. That's a bad look.
Chicago's already in the news so much for bad things happening there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So...
but that's the real reputation that Chicago has now that maybe 10 years ago it didn't have as much, is just being a huge hub of just murders.
Yeah.
And do you think that's something that you could see getting better, or is that something that's just going to... Have you seen it improve at all?
It was improved. I mean, the murder rate had declined. I mean, but it's now back up the highest since like the 90s.
Right.
But it had been declining every year for like 20 years. And now it's back up. But it's just,
like nationwide, like violence is down, murders are down, but then Chicago and like certain other areas in the city or in the state seem like they are more fucked up than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
It's just a lot of crazy stuff going on, man. It's like people don't respect each other's lives, and it's not even about money or like drugs anymore. It's really about like you diss me on social media, and I do say this, like social media is probably going to be our undoing as a society.
Yeah,
I mean people are getting killed over tweets and Facebook posts and Instagram posts and stuff like that. Yeah, which is wild.
And do you feel like you have a certain way that you have to approach those types of scenarios? Because like the one that always stands out to me is when Lil Jojo got killed, and it was just so it's so obviously unfolded entirely on social media. The video of fucking Reese taunting him or whatever and all this stuff. And it was just like, and the dude who killed JoJo never got caught, right?
Yeah, I don't think that ever got solved. That was a very sensitive issue. That was like kind of like the beginning of the end of like the drill.
Right.
Like that kind of it kind of all fell apart after that.
That was a big one for it. Yeah, I could see that. But Keef's response just showed like how real it was too. That these kids really do not have a lot of respect for fucking human life.
Right.
And that not even in a bad way either, because I get it. Like you kill my friend, I kill your friend. That's how it goes. Not me, but someone else. Like I get it, but I don't know. That was just such a crazy moment. But then it's a weird decision for you too, because how do you cover that?
Right.
It's completely relevant to your audience, but you don't want to seem like you're relishing.
No, and I'm not. And like I didn't cover that stuff. And like people are like, "Why aren't you putting up the videos of them taunting?" I'm like, dude, I'm not here. I'm here to talk about the music. I'm not putting the beef videos. I'm not putting all the news of who's beefing, who got shot, and who. I'm not. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what I got into this for.
Right.
I do not have a fascination with that. I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
And that was tough.
That's a tough decision, and especially because, like,
But some people are ruthless. They don't care. They want the traffic, so they'll write about it. I don't.
Shout out academics. He's fucking over here at the war in Chirac. That always kind of seems bizarre to me as like kind of an outsider to that he was just really profiting off it. And I mean,
people don't live there, so they don't have
to him. But
yeah, of course not. But like, if you don't live there, you don't have to worry about the repercussions. So you can say whatever you want. I live in Chicago.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It could get hairy real quick if you were really covering that stuff hard. Yeah.
I want no part of that.
Yeah.
I try to keep it positive.
Yeah,
totally. I try.
Who do you have to thank for your career up to this point? Who stands out to you as people that really put their neck out for you or helped you out?
Probably my wife, definitely. But like, I had people that were cool within the industry, but the music industry is weird. A lot of people don't want to help you.
Yeah,
I don't feel like I never had a mentor or anybody that like really showed me the way. So like, I had to get tough and get a thick skin and try to climb my way up.
Right.
Because it's not like people give me looks. I mean, eventually, like a Red Bull, who's been great to work with. They've done more for me than anybody. It's not like any of these label people or industry executives. They don't reach out to try to help me or never try to do anything. A&Rs just used to call me and try to use me for information.
Right.
They would, hey man, hey, we'll give you your own label if you tell us this and help us get this person signed, and just dangling carrots, and it was really whack.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have anybody to really put their neck out. And I think a lot of times maybe people feel threatened when they see the next generation person coming up. They don't embrace them. They don't, I don't want to lose my job to him.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the case, but I feel like that's kind of the music business mentality.
Right. Totally.
There's not a lot of spots, so I don't want to lose my spot.
Yeah, totally. Well, hey, man, it's good to talk to somebody who's still going hard on the blog scene, because it is such a changing lane, and just the internet is constantly just doing different things, and all of a sudden it matters. If you're a rapper, all of a sudden your Snapchat presence might mean more than a blog, or your fucking YouTube videos, blah blah blah. I don't know. It's a wild world out there, but I'm glad to see you still prospering.
And let me just say this, like. And we're still figuring this new era out because it's one day at a time. So like, what happens when you're a rapper and you become irrelevant, but you still have like 2 million Instagram followers?
Yeah.
Can you fall off in this era? Can there be a Ja Rule 50 Cent battle where the one rapper becomes irrelevant when they have 5 million Instagram followers and like 5 million Snapchat? Like, you're still relevant now.
But you're relevant for something else. You're relevant for being famous,
right?
As opposed to the music. Yeah, that's always weird as fuck for me when I see dudes who are like objectively huge on social media, but then you look at their SoundCloud and they might do 50,000 plays or whatever, but everybody knows who this guy is,
right? Just famous for being famous.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of people, like, I think they just want to be famous. They don't even care necessarily about the music. Yeah, the music got them famous.
Yeah.
Then eventually the music becomes not important. It's about being the the Snapchat personality or the Twitter personality or the Instagram personality.
That kind of goes back to like how dudes start rapping in the first place, because I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of dudes who start rap careers aren't necessarily trying to make $1 million. They're trying to be known in their neighborhood.
Right.
And then they kind of scale that out. Like, I want to be the dude in my city.
Right.
And they, and then maybe at a certain point that's okay. They fall back on that and they can just, they got famous. They got popular off it.
Yeah. So, just trying to figure it out and stay doing it and do cool stuff and, do exciting things in the Midwest.
Hell yeah. That's dope, man. Well, it's dope to see someone who's like really focused on their scene too, and that doesn't just do what I do and move out to LA and just go to.
But you're living the life out here, man.
Just barely, just making it, rubbing two sticks together, Shit. So for the people who don't know, who've been listening to this interview in the fucking dark, where can people keep up to date with you?
Yeah, at Fake Shore Drive on all social media, Instagram, Twitter. FakeShoreDrive.com is the website.
Yeah. So, hey, check it out.
I'm around. Thank you. Appreciate thanks for having me on, man.
My pleasure. It's been awesome. I feel so great to finally have my sound hopefully fixed. I mean, it sounds good to me. You guys can let me know if it still sounds good. I don't know. I might need a couple more knobs turned, but I'm pretty sure it sounds great. Thank you so much, Andrew. This has been awesome. Everybody check his shit out. Check us out, No Jumper, on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. Peace.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hope that was good.
No, that was great.
Try to kick some knowledge.
Yeah, totally. I forgot about the disrespectful radio thing. I was thinking about that the other day, and I just couldn't remember the name of it. But that Yams one, that was the first one I think I ever listened to.
Yeah, the Yams one was great.
Yeah.
We had to do that over the phone.
Yeah.
That was like 2011.
I bet you're surprised that I remember Katie Vance talking about
I can't believe
working
it.
at McDonald's.
I cannot believe you remember that.
For some reason, that's like the one thing I remember because it was just like this quick peek behind the curtain,
She's like a real
just
person.
a regular person who just happened to, I was younger at that point. It kind of seemed like a rapper was a big deal, Or,
Do you follow her on any social media?
I think I might have her muted on Twitter. Sorry, Katie.
Oh.
That's all right.